Sylvia Turner stood in the road with dust on her hem and a paper marriage promise crushed in her fist, while every face on the boardwalk watched her become unwanted. The man who had sent for a bride looked her over once, saw patched gloves, tired eyes, and no trunk worth stealing, then turned his back before the church bell finished ringing. No one moved to help her. No one, except the quiet farmhand at the hitching rail, Levi Yardley, whose hat shadowed a face hardened by work and loneliness. The town saw shame in Sylvia's lowered head. Levi saw a woman still standing after the blow. And when the choice came, it was not money that called to her, but the steady hand he offered from the dust. Before we begin, leave your country name below and tell me where this western night is reaching you. Subscribe if stories of rejected brides, protective cowboys, and hard-earned love keep you listening. By the time the westbound stage rolled into Mercy Crossing, the whole town had already heard that Sylvia Turner was coming to marry Mr. Alistair Crane. It should have been a private arrival. A woman stepping down from a stage with a valise in one hand and a hope in the other should have been met with kindness, or at least with quiet. But Mercy Crossing was not a town that let a story pass by untouched. News traveled there faster than fire through dry grass, and by noon half the shops had emptied onto the boardwalk. The blacksmith wiped his hands on a rag and leaned in his doorway. Two women from the sewing circle stood outside Mercer's Mercantile, pretending to discuss calico while their eyes never left the stage road. Boys perched on the rail by the livery stable. Even old Mrs. Prout, who claimed she did not believe in gossip, had come out with her bonnet strings tied tight beneath her chin. Sylvia felt them before she saw them. She had ridden 3 days through choking heat and 1 night through rain that seeped through the stage roof and down the back of her dress. She had lost her good shawl when the driver tied luggage poorly near Abilene. Her left boot pinched where the sole had begun to part. The small brown valise she carried held 2 dresses, a Bible with her mother's name written inside it, a tin of buttons, and the letter Alistair Crane had sent her 6 months ago. Miss Sylvia Turner, the letter had said, I am a man of means in need of a wife who understands work, order, and Christian duty. If you are willing to come west, I will provide a respectable home. Respectable. That word had carried her through long weeks of fear. She had been 28 years old when the widow she worked for in Missouri died, and left her with no wages, no family, and no place to sleep but the pantry floor for 2 nights until the new owner told her to go. 28 was late for a woman with no beauty to trade on and no inheritance to soften her plainness. Folks had said she ought to be grateful for any offer. So she wrote back to Mr. Crane in careful ink and accepted. Now she stepped down into Mercy Crossing with that letter folded in her pocket like a fragile piece of proof that she had been wanted once. Alistair Crane stood in front of the bank beside the church deacon and 2 cattlemen. He was exactly as his photograph had shown him. Narrow-faced, dark-haired, handsome in a cold way, his coat cut from fine cloth and his boots polished to a shine that had never known manure or mud. A silver watch chain glinted across his vest. Sylvia saw him and tried to smile. Mr. Crane. He looked at her as if she had spoken out of turn in a courtroom. You are Miss Turner? Yes, sir. She held her valise tighter. I'm sorry the stage is late. A wheel cracked near Bitter Creek, and we had to wait. His eyes moved from her dusty bonnet to the frayed cuffs of her sleeves, then to the valise. Where's the trunk? Sylvia blinked. The trunk? You wrote that your late mother had left household linens, silver, and certain keepsakes. I wrote that she left linens and keepsakes. Her throat tightened. The silver was sold when she took sick. I did not mean to mislead you. A murmur moved along the boardwalk, soft and sharp. Alistair's jaw set. I was told you were from a respectable family. I was. She looked down. We had hardship after my father died. Hardship, he repeated. and somehow he made the words sound like dirt. The deacon cleared his throat and looked away. One of the women by the mercantile whispered behind her glove. Sylvia felt heat climb her neck. "Mr. Crane, I came because you asked me to. I worked for my passage. I have your letter." He did not reach for it. "I asked for a wife," he said, "not another burden." The words landed so plainly that no one could pretend not to hear them. Sylvia's fingers went numb around the valise handle. "I can cook," she said, though she hated herself for pleading. "I can keep house. I can sew, tend chickens, wash, mend, read scripture aloud, keep accounts if they are not too difficult. I do not require much. That is clear." A few people laughed, not loudly. It would have been easier if they had. Quiet laughter has a way of slipping under the skin like a splinter. Alistair took a folded paper from his coat. "This arrangement is ended. Deacon Halsey will witness that I release myself from the understanding. As the woman arrived under false representation, I did not lie. No." He gave a small, cruel smile. "Perhaps you only hoped poverty would look prettier from a distance." Sylvia stood very still. The town waited for her to cry. She could feel it. They wanted tears because tears made the story round and satisfying. Poor bride comes west. Rich man refuses her. She collapses in the dust. Something to repeat over supper. Something to pity and judge in equal measure. But Sylvia Turner had learned long ago that tears did not purchase bread. She swallowed them until they burned. "Then I will trouble you no further," she said. She turned to the stage driver, but he was already unloading freight and avoiding her eyes. "Sir," she asked, "when does the next coach east leave?" "Not till Friday," he muttered. "And fares due in advance." Friday was 4 days away. Sylvia had 7 cents. Her hand slipped into her pocket around Alistair's letter. She wanted to tear it into pieces, but paper had use. Paper could start a cook fire if she found a stove. Paper could wrap bread if she found work enough to buy some. She lifted her valise and stepped away from the bank. That was when a man moved from the shade near the hitching rail. He was tall, though he stood as if he did not care whether anyone noticed. His brown hat had sweat stains around the band, and his shirt was faded from many washings. Dust lay on his boots and cuffs. He had the lean, hard look of a man who had spent more nights under weather than under a roof. A short scar cut through one eyebrow, giving his face a sternness even at rest. Sylvia had seen him while she stepped down. Unlike the others, he had not stared as if she were a spectacle. He had looked once, quietly, then lowered his eyes as though giving her privacy. No one else would. Now he came forward. Alistair's mouth tightened. "Yardley, this does not concern you." The man did not even glance at him. "Miss Turner," he said, his voice low and rough from dust, "you need water." The simple question nearly broke her. "Nah, are you ashamed? Not where will you go, not what did you expect. Water." Sylvia nodded before she trusted herself to speak. The man reached for the canteen hanging from his saddle, pulled the cork, and offered it to her with both hands, as if she were not an abandoned bride in front of a laughing town, but a guest. She drank one small swallow, then another. The water tasted of tin and leather, and it was the finest thing she had ever been given. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once. Alistair gave a thin laugh. "Careful, Miss Turner. Levi Yardley has less to offer than you do. He mucks stalls at the Barrow place and sleeps in a loft when the rats allow it." More laughter, this time louder. The farmhand's face did not change. Sylvia turned toward Alistair. "A loft honestly earned is not shameful." The laughter faded. Levi Yardley looked at her then, truly looked. His eyes were gray, not cold, but guarded, like winter clouds holding back snow. Something passed through them that Sylvia could not name. Alistair's cheeks darkened. "You would defend a hired hand who has nothing." Sylvia's fingers tightened around the canteen. "He offered what he had before any of you offered what you could spare." The boardwalk grew quiet enough for the creak of the stage harness to sound loud. For the first time since Sylvia arrived, Alistair Crane looked uncertain. Levi took the canteen back slowly. Mrs. Bell at the boarding house might trade supper for kitchen work. He said to Sylvia, "I can walk you there. I can walk alone, I know." His voice softened by almost nothing. But the streets crowded. It was not a romantic thing to say. It was not fine or flattering. But it was protective without pity. And Sylvia felt the difference down to her bones. She lifted her chin, took up her valise, and walked beside Levi Yardley through the watching town. Behind them, whispers rose again. Poor Bry. Plain thing. Crane was right to refuse her. Yardley's a fool. Maybe fools belong together. Sylvia heard every word. Levi heard them too. She knew, because his jaw hardened. But he did not turn around, did not make a show, did not give the town the fight it wanted. He simply shortened his stride to match hers, and walked close enough that no one could step between them. At the boarding house door, Mrs. Bell opened before they knocked. She was a stout woman with flour on her forearms, and judgment already sharpened in her eyes. "No rooms unless paid. I'm looking for work," Sylvia said. Mrs. Bell looked over her shoulder at Levi. "You vouching for her?" Levi removed his hat. "I'm saying she's had a hard day and hasn't eaten. That ain't vouching." "No, Ma. It's telling the truth." Mrs. Bell studied Sylvia. "Can you peel potatoes?" "Yes." "Can you scrub pans?" "Yes." "Can you keep from crying in my kitchen?" "I don't hold with dripping tears in dishwater." Sylvia straightened. "I can." The woman stepped aside. "Then you can earn supper. Bed in the pantry for tonight only." Relief made Sylvia dizzy. She turned to Hank Levi, but he had already stepped back into the yard. "Mr. Yardley," he paused. "You did not have to help me." "No, ma'am." "Then why did you?" His gaze shifted toward the road where Alistair Crane still stood, among men who measured worth in property lines and banknotes. "Because I know what it is to be valued wrong," he said. Then he put on his hat and walked away before she could ask what he meant. That night, while Sylvia peeled potatoes until her fingers cramped, Mercy Crossing carried her shame from table to table, lamp to lamp, porch to porch. By morning, everyone knew Alistair Crane had refused his bride. Not everyone knew that Levi Yardley had watched Sylvia Turner defend him when defending him cost her the last scrap of public favor she had. But Levi knew, and long after the town went dark, he lay awake in the barrow stable loft, staring at moonlight through the boards, wondering what kind of woman, hungry and abandoned, still had courage enough to protect a man she believed had nothing. Sylvia learned quickly that pity had a short life in Mercy Crossing. By breakfast the next morning, the town had settled her into a shape it understood. She was not a woman who had been wronged. She was a warning. Mothers used her name in quiet voices over biscuits. "Do not answer letters from men you do not know. Do not arrive with one valise. Do not grow too old to choose carefully. Do not be so plain that a man feels cheated when he sees you." Mrs. Bell did not speak unkindly, but she did not speak gently either. "There are dishes after breakfast, laundry after that, and if you're still here by noon, the back steps need scrubbing." "I'll do it," Sylvia said. "You got people?" "No, ma'am." "Money coming?" "No." "A woman alone needs either people or money." Sylvia kept her eyes on the dishwater. "Then I'll need work." Mrs. Bell grunted, as if that was the first sensible thing she had heard. For 2 days Sylvia worked from before sunup until after supper. She slept on a narrow cot in the pantry between flour barrels and sacks of beans. At night, mice scratched inside the walls, and the smell of onions soaked into her hair. It was still better than the street. She saw Levi Yardley only in passing. Once he came to the boarding house with a sack of oats over his shoulder for Mrs. Bell's old mule. Once she saw him by the well repairing a split bucket handle with wire. Another time he crossed the road carrying a broken harness, and a group of young men called out that if he hurried, he might still catch the rejected bride before someone richer came along. Levi did not answer. Sylvia wished he had. Then she was glad he had not. Silence could be dignity when a man had strength enough to choose it. On the third afternoon, Mrs. Bell sent Sylvia to Mercer's Mercantile for salt, lamp oil, and a paper twist of tea. The air had turned colder, with clouds dragging low over the prairie, and a wind that smelled of coming rain. Sylvia wrapped her thin shawl tight around her shoulders, and kept her eyes lowered as she crossed the street. Mercer's bell rang above the door. Conversation stopped. 3 women stood near the counter. Mrs. Pruitt was among them, along with Deacon Halsey's wife, and a younger woman Sylvia recognized as Lydia Crane, Alistair's sister. Lydia wore a green dress with black braid at the cuffs and a little feathered hat that had never known weather. "Well," Lydia said, "Mercy Crossing does take in every stray." Sylvia reached for the salt barrel. "Good afternoon." Aye, is it?" Lydia smiled. "I suppose that depends on whether one arrived expecting a husband and found a pantry cot instead." The shopkeeper looked down at his ledger. Sylvia measured salt into the paper packet with hands she forced not to shake. Mrs. Pruitt sighed. A woman must be honest about her prospects. Pride leads to humiliation. Sylvia tied the packet. "I have found humiliation comes just as often from other people's pride." Lydia's smile vanished. The bell rang again before anyone could answer. Levi Yardley stepped inside, carrying a coil of rope. The room changed around him, not out of respect exactly, more from the unease a quiet man can bring when he looks as though he has heard enough. Lydia recovered first. "Mr. Yardley, come to purchase a wedding gift for your pantry bride." Levi set the rope on the counter. "No, pity. She seems inexpensive." The words struck Sylvia harder than Alistair's had. Perhaps because this time she had been trying simply to buy salt. Levi turned his head slowly. "Miss Crane, you ever been hungry?" Lydia blinked. "I beg your pardon. Hungry," he repeated. "Not peckish before supper. Not tired of chicken when you wanted beef. I mean hungry enough that your hands shake and you count beans before boiling them." Her face colored. "That is hardly a proper question." "No," Levi said. "Neither was your remark." Mrs. Halsey gasped softly. Levi looked at the shopkeeper. "Put Mrs. Bell's purchases on my account." Sylvia spoke quickly. "No, please. I'm working for them." "Then put half on mine," he said. "Work deserves more than pantry sleep." The shopkeeper's pencil hovered. "Your account, Yardley?" Levi's eyes held steady. "You heard me." A strange look passed over Mr. Mercer's face. He wrote the charge without another word. Sylvia gathered the parcels, her pride stinging though gratitude warmed beneath it. Outside, Levi followed her onto the boardwalk. "You should not have paid," she said. "I paid Mercer, not you. It becomes the same thing if I cannot repay it." "You can repay it by not fainting from hunger while scrubbing floors." She looked at him then. "Do I look so frail?" "No." Something almost like admiration touched his voice. "You look like you've learned to stand when sitting down would be easier." The wind tugged at her shawl. Sylvia held the parcels close. "Thank you for speaking in there. I don't care for cruelty dressed up as manners. Most people do not call it cruelty when it is aimed at someone poor." His mouth tightened. "I know." There it was again, that shadow behind his words. Before Sylvia could ask, thunder rolled low over the prairie. Levi looked west. "Storm's coming hard. I should get back. I'll walk you." She opened her mouth to refuse, but rain began in cold, slanting drops. By the time they reached the crossing, the street had turned slick. A freight wagon came too fast around the corner near the livery. The driver hunched against rain, the horses startled by a loose tarp snapping from the load. Sylvia heard Levi shout before she understood the danger. The team veered. A child stood frozen in the road. It was Mrs. Bell's youngest niece, Annie, no more than 6, clutching a rag doll and staring at the horses bearing down on her. Sylvia dropped the parcels and ran. She did not think of her sore feet, or the mud, or the watching windows. She caught Annie around the waist and stumbled toward the boardwalk. The wagon wheel struck a puddle, spraying grit and water. Sylvia's boot slipped. She twisted, shielding the child with her body as they fell hard against the steps. The wagon thundered past. For a moment there was only rain. Then Annie began to cry. Sylvia sat in the mud holding her, heart hammered so violently she could not breathe. Levi was there at once. "You hurt, Annie?" Sylvia gasped. "Check Annie." The little girl clung to Sylvia's neck, sobbing but whole. Mrs. Bell came running from the boarding house, apron over her head. "Lord preserve us." Levi crouched. "Miss Turner, your wrist." Sylvia looked down. Her right wrist was swelling already, mud streaked across the skin. "It's nothing." "It isn't." He helped her stand with a care that made her more aware of herself than the injury. His hand was rough and warm around her elbow, not claiming, not soft in a way that invited gossip, simply steady. Mrs. Bell gathered Annie close, pale with fright. "You saved her." Sylvia wiped mud from her cheek. She was in the road, as if that explained everything. By supper, the story had changed. Some still whispered that Sylvia had been foolish to run before a wagon. Others admitted she had moved fast. Mrs. Bell gave her a proper room under the stairs, instead of the pantry, and wrapped her wrist in comfrey. "You'll be no use with laundry tomorrow," Mrs. Bell said gruffly. "I can still sweep. You can rest till noon. Don't argue when I'm being charitable. I ain't practiced at it." Late that evening, Levi came to the back door with a bundle wrapped in brown cloth. Mrs. Bell answered and called Sylvia from the kitchen. "He brought something." Sylvia came out with her wrist bound, hair braided over one shoulder. Levi stood just beyond the threshold as if he would not enter a house where she slept without permission. "This was my mother's," he said, holding out the bundle. Sylvia hesitated. "Your mother's? A shawl? Wool? It's clean. I cannot take your mother's shawl. She's gone. It's been in my trunk near 10 years. Seems foolish for good wool to sit while someone shivers." Sylvia touched the edge of the cloth. "Dark blue wool, mended in 2 places with careful stitches. I'll borrow it," she said, "until I can return something equal." Levi gave the faintest shake of his head. "You already did." "What?" "In Mercer's store." "You spoke as if I was worth defending." Her chest tightened. "You are," she said. The rain softened outside, tapping the porch roof and running in silver threads from the eaves. Levi looked at her with that guarded gray gaze. Most folks see a farmhand and stop looking. Most folks saw an unwanted bride and stopped looking too. The words hung between them, plain and intimate. From inside the kitchen, Mrs. Bell banged a pot loudly enough to remind them doors had ears. Levi stepped back. "Good night, Miss Turner." "Good night, Mr. Yardley." He turned to go. "Levi," she said before she could lose courage. He paused. "Thank you for the shawl." A softness crossed his face so briefly she might have imagined it. "You're welcome, Sylvia." It was the first time he had used her given name. After he left, Sylvia stood in the doorway with the blue shawl pressed against her heart. It smelled faintly of cedar and smoke. It was only wool, worn and mended. But in a town where people had looked at her as a mistake, Levi Yardley had given her something kept from his own past, and she understood, with a quiet fear, that kindness could be more dangerous to a lonely heart than insult. The storm washed Mercy crossing clean by morning, but it did not wash away judgment. It only made the streets shine while people carried on as before. Sylvia's wrist kept her from heavy scrubbing, so Mrs. Bell put her to lighter work, shelling peas, cutting dough, reading receipts aloud from an old book whose pages had been spotted by grease and years. By the end of the week, Sylvia knew the rhythm of the boarding house. Railroad men wanted coffee before words. Traveling salesmen lied about their importance when they were tired. Ranch hands ate as if every meal might be their last. Levi came every other evening to deliver something for Mrs. Bell or repair what needed repairing: a loose hinge, a cracked rain barrel, a shelf sagging under jars of preserves. He hadn't paid to fix my place, Mrs. Bell said once, while watching him mend the back gate. Then why does he? Because he sees things that need doing and does them. Mrs. Bell glanced at Sylvia. That kind of man is either a blessing or a fool. Might be both, Sylvia said quietly. Outside, Levi tested the gate, found it sturdy, and turned toward the stable. Sylvia began to notice the town's treatment of him more closely. Men called him Yardley when they needed a horse handled, Levi when they wanted a favor, and Boy when they wanted to remind him of his place. Though he was past 30, he took orders from Caleb Barrow, a rancher who owned the spread where Levi worked. Barrow was not cruel, exactly, but he had the careless authority of a man born with land. He spoke to Levi as if Levi's thoughts came with the wages and could be dismissed at will. Yet Levi moved through mercy, crossing with a patience that did not feel weak. It felt chosen. One afternoon, Mrs. Bell sent Sylvia to the Barrow place with a covered basket. Caleb Barrow's wife had delivered a baby girl and needed broth, bread, and clean cloths. Sylvia wrapped Levi's blue shawl over her shoulders and rode in the back of Mrs. Bell's wagon beside Annie, who had decided Sylvia was the bravest woman alive and would not let her travel alone. The Barrow Ranch lay 2 miles north of town where the grass rolled gold beneath a white sky. The house was large and whitewashed, with smoke rising from 2 chimneys. Corrals stretched behind it. Men moved cattle through a gate while dogs barked and horses stamped in the damp earth. Sylvia saw Levi by the barn, sleeves rolled, helping a young colt accept a halter. He did not force the animal. He stood near, patient, letting the colt toss its head and step away, then offering his hand again. The scene held her. A man's true nature showed in how he handled frightened things. Annie waved. Mr. Levi. The colt startled, but Levi murmured low and steady until it calmed. He looked up and saw Sylvia. His gaze went first to the shawl, then to her face. You found your way, he said. Mrs. Bell sent broth. Mrs. Barrow will be grateful. She's had a hard time. Sylvia climbed down carefully. Her wrist was better, but still tender. Levi reached as if to help, then stopped, giving her the choice. She placed her hand in his. It was the smallest act. Still, it felt like crossing water. Inside the Barrow house, Sylvia found chaos. The new baby cried in a cradle. Mrs. Barrow lay pale and exhausted. A boy of 4 had spilled molasses under the table, and a girl of 8 was trying not to cry while burning porridge on the stove. Sylvia set down the basket and began. She did not ask permission because the house had no room for delay. She lifted the porridge off the stove, cleaned the molasses with hot water and ash, gave the boy bread with honey, showed the girl how to hold the baby upright against her shoulder, then warmed broth for Mrs. Barrow. Within an hour, the kitchen breathed again. Mrs. Barrow watched from the bedroom doorway. You've done this before. I worked in a house with 6 children after my father died. You have children? No, ma'am. Sylvia felt the old ache that question always brought, not because she had lost children, but because life had never come close enough to offer them. When she stepped outside later, Levi was repairing a plow handle beneath a cottonwood tree. You settled the whole house, he said. I made broth and cleaned molasses, no doubt. You brought peace. The compliment was too direct. Sylvia looked toward the pasture. Peace is mostly seeing what needs doing before it worsens. Levi smiled slightly. I thought the same about fences. She sat on a stump nearby, while Annie played with Barrow's children near the porch. The afternoon sun had come through the clouds, laying pale gold over the ranch yard. The smell of wet earth rose with hay and horse sweat. You're good with horses, Sylvia said. I trust them more than men. That sounds lonely. It is simpler. She looked at him. Simple is not always better. No, he said after a moment. It is just safer. The words were quiet, but she felt the weight in them. A rider came into the yard before she could answer. He was broad-shouldered, red-bearded, and dressed in a coat too fine for ranch work. His horse was a blood bay with silver on the bridle. He dismounted without tying the reins, expecting someone else to see to it. Levi stood. The rider's eyes moved over Sylvia and dismissed her. Yardley, he said, still playing servant. Levi's face closed. Rusk, Silas Rusk. Sylvia knew the name from boarding house talk. A rival rancher from west of town, rich in cattle, poor in mercy, and rumored to be buying debt wherever he could find it. Men lowered their voices when they spoke of him. Rusk tossed a paper toward Levi. It struck the dirt near his boot. Barrow here, with his wife. Then give him that. Notes due in 30 days. If he can't pay, I'll take the north pasture and the water rights. Tell him not to whine. Business is business. Levi did not pick up the paper. Rusk smiled. You can read, can't you? Sylvia stood before she planned to. Most men can read cruelty, Mr. Rusk, even when it is poorly written. His eyes cut to her. And you are? Sylvia Turner. His smile widened. Ah, Crane's discarded bride. Levi moved one step. Sylvia lifted her chin. No, Sylvia Turner. The yard went still. Rusk laughed. Mercy, crossing, does collect proud beggars. Levi's voice dropped. Right on. Or what? Rusk stepped closer. You mend me like a gate. Remember your place, farmhand. For a moment Sylvia thought Levi might strike him. His hands curled, then opened. I remember more than you think, Levi said. Something in his tone wiped the smile from Rusk's mouth. The rancher looked at him sharply, as if hearing another man beneath the hired hand's voice. Then he mounted. 30 days, he called. Tell Barrow, and tell Crane I might have use for the woman he didn't. Levi took 2 fast steps, but Rusk rode out laughing. Sylvia's face went cold. Levi bent and picked up the paper. His hand trembled once before he stilled it. I'm sorry, he said. You did not insult me. I stood there while he did. You stood there because children were watching and because violence would have pleased him. Her voice softened. That is not nothing. Levi looked toward the porch, where Annie and the others had gone quiet. No, he said, but it burns. They stood together in that burn, not speaking. Sylvia understood then that trust did not always grow in candlelight or whispered confessions. Sometimes it grew in the shared discipline of not answering evil with the shape it expected. Over the next week, Sylvia's life changed by inches. Mrs. Bell hired her properly. The room under the stairs became hers for as long as she worked. Her wrist healed. She began taking in mending from ranch wives, who pretended they were doing her a favor, though her stitches were finer than anyone's in town. Annie followed her everywhere when allowed. Mrs. Barrow sent eggs as thanks. People still whispered, but a few nodded now. And Levi, not courting, not officially. He brought split kindling when Mrs. Bell's shoulder ached. He left a sack of apples at the kitchen door and claimed they were bruised windfalls, though Sylvia found only 2 bruises in the lot. He taught Annie how to carve a whistle from willow. He walked beside Sylvia to church, not close enough for scandal, close enough that no one stepped in front of her. One Sunday, Deacon Halsey preached on humility, while Alistair Crane sat in the front pew with his sister. The sermon pressed so pointedly toward women who overreached their station that Sylvia felt the congregation listening at her back. After service, as people gathered outside, Alistair approached. Miss Turner, he said, I hope you are settling into a more suitable position. Sylvia folded her hands. Work suits me, so I see. His gaze flicked to Levi. You have made friends in low places. Levi said nothing. Alistair leaned closer. Do be careful. A woman already refused cannot afford further association with a man who owns nothing but his boots. Sylvia looked at those polished boots of Alistair's, then at Levi's worn ones. I have learned boots tell only where a man steps, she said, not what he stands for. A murmur moved through the churchyard. Levi looked away, but not before she saw the emotion he tried to hide. That evening, he walked her back to the boarding house beneath a sky, bruised purple with sunset. You should not spend your courage on me, he said. I spend it where I choose. I'm not worth trouble. Sylvia stopped. He stopped too, his face shadowed under his hat. That is the second time you've said something near that, she said. Who taught you? It was true. For a long moment, he did not answer. Then he looked out over the darkening prairie. People who had reason. Sylvia's heart ached, not with pity, but recognition. My father lost our farm, she said. After that, people spoke as if failure had soaked into our blood. I believed them for a while. Some mornings I still hear their voices. What do you do? I work until my own voice grows louder. Levi looked back at her. And what does your voice say? Sylvia drew the blue shawl closer around her shoulders. That I am still here. The sunset dimmed. A lamp came on in Mrs. Bell's kitchen window. Levi removed his hat, turned it in his hands once, then put it back on. That's a strong thing to say, he murmured. It is the only thing I know for certain. He walked her the rest of the way without another word, but something had shifted. Not into ease, not yet, into possibility. And possibility, Sylvia had learned, was a frightening kind of hope. The first hard frost came early that year. It silvered the grass beyond Mercy Crossing and put white edges on every roof. Women began stuffing rags in window cracks. Men spoke of hay, debt, and winter as if all three were weather systems rolling in together. At the boarding house, Mrs. Bell counted flour sacks with a frown. Prices are going up, she said. Russ bought 2 freight loads before anyone else could bid. Why would he need so much flour? Sylvia asked. He doesn't. He needs everyone else to need it from him. Silas Rusk's shadow lengthened over Mercy Crossing as the days shortened. He held Barrow's note. He held paper on 2 small farms south of town. He had purchased the old mill road and charged wagons to pass. Men who once laughed easily now spoke in tight voices near stoves and doorways. Levi changed too. He still came by, still helped, still walked Sylvia home from church. But he carried some inward burden that made his silences heavier. Twice she saw him outside the telegraph office, reading a folded message. Once he rode south before dawn and returned after dark, his horse lathered and his face drawn. Rumors found him. A cattleman passing through, claimed Levi Yardley, had once worked for a mining concern in Colorado. Another, said Yardley, was not his real name. Lydia Crane hinted that Levi had left a woman in Denver. Deacon Halsey suggested from the pulpit that hidden pasts were often hidden for good reason. Sylvia did not ask at first. She knew what it was to have people demand pieces of your story before offering trust, but the matter was forced on a Thursday evening when Alistair Crane came to the boarding house. Mrs. Bell was in the pantry. Sylvia was alone in the dining room laying plates for supper when the front door opened. She looked up and found Alistair removing his gloves. We are not serving for another hour, she said. I did not come for supper. She kept a plate in her hands. Then Mrs. Bell will be with you shortly. I came to speak with you. No, the words surprised them both. But Sylvia did not soften it. Alistair's mouth tightened. You should hear what I have to say. I have heard you before. His eyes moved over the room, making certain they were alone. Levi Yardley is deceiving you. Sylvia set the plate down carefully. Good evening, Mr. Crane. He is not some noble, poor man. He is a fraud. She stilled. Alistair saw it and pressed closer. My bank received inquiry papers from Cheyenne. Yardley has ties to a fortune. Land, rail shares, mining interests. He has been hiding under our noses as a farmhand. Sylvia's first feeling was not anger. It was confusion. Then hurt came, not sharp but deep and slow. Alistair smiled, mistaking her silence for victory. You defended him because you thought him low and honest. How does it feel to know he let you make a fool of yourself? Sylvia looked at him. Why tell me? Because a woman in your position should be practical. If Yardley is wealthy, he will not marry a rejected bride once his game is done. Men with fortunes choose women with polish. Like you chose kindness, His face hardened. I could still offer you protection, he said. Not marriage. That chance is past. But employment in my household. Better than chasing a man who is laughing behind your back. The insult was so complete that Sylvia almost admired its shape. Leave, she said. You will regret pride. No, I have regretted fear. Pride, at least, keeps its spine. Mrs. Bell appeared in the doorway with a sack of flour hugged to her chest. You heard her. Alistair turned stiffly and left. Sylvia stood very still until the door closed. Then she sat, because her knees had weakened. Mrs. Bell set the flour down. What did he say? That Levi has money. Mrs. Bell's brows rose. Does he? I don't know. Would it change him? Sylvia did not answer. That was the question that hurt. She had not chosen Levi, not in the full-spoken sense, but some part of her heart had begun moving toward him, because she believed they stood on the same ground. Poor, judged, useful when needed, dismissed when not. She had defended the hired hand because she saw honor where others saw low station. If he was rich, had he watched her struggle while able to change it? Had he let the town mock him by choice, while she had no choice at all? Had their sameness been only another illusion? She tried to work through supper, but her mind kept circling the same thought. Most folks see a farmhand and stop looking. Had he wanted her to look? Had he tested her? The next day, Levi came to the back door with a sack of cornmeal. Sylvia stepped outside before Mrs. Bell could call her. We should speak, she said. He looked at her face and understood at once. Who told you? Alistair Crane. Levi closed his eyes briefly. I should have told you first. The honesty of the words struck between them. He set the sack down. I can explain. I hope so. They walked to the edge of the yard where the woodpile stood beneath a leafless elm. The afternoon was cold and bright. Smoke rose from chimneys along the street. Levi leaned one hand on the fence, then drew it back, as if he needed nothing to hold. My father was Thomas Yardley, he said. He owned cattle in Texas, freight lines in Kansas, mining shares he bought cheap before anyone knew they mattered. By the time I was 20, people called him a king. Sylvia waited. He was a hard man, not loud, not drunk, just hard. He believed money proved God favored him and poverty proved God had looked away. My mother was gentle, but she died before I was old enough to understand what her gentleness cost her. His voice roughened. When I was 23, my father arranged a marriage for me to a banker's daughter, Clara Whitcomb. She was beautiful and trained to be admired. I thought she loved me. Maybe she thought so too. Then my father lost a quarter of his holdings in a bad winter and a railroad fight. For 6 months, folks believed we were ruined. Clara's family broke the engagement within a week. Sylvia's anger shifted, not leaving, but making room. What happened? My father recovered twice what he lost. He wanted me to go back and make them crawl. Levi looked toward the street. I didn't. Something in me had already broken, not because Clara left, because I realized I did not know whether anyone in my life saw me, apart from what the Yardley name could buy. So you came here. Not at first. I worked cattle drives under another name. Then I learned my father had bought land near Mercy Crossing before he died. The papers came to me. I came to see it and found Rusk trying to swallow every small place around it. I stayed as a hand because men speak freely around someone they think beneath them, and because you wanted to know whether people would value you without money. He met her eyes. Yes. The word was quiet. Sylvia drew a breath. Including me. Pain crossed his face. First, I didn't know you. By the time I did, I was afraid telling you would make every kind thing between us feel false. It does feel false. He took the blow without defense. I'm sorry, he said. You paid half Mrs. Bell's purchases. You gave me your mother's shawl. You listened while people insulted you for poverty. You could have ended with a sentence. His jaw tightened. Yes. And you watched me believe we were standing in the same dust. Levi looked down. I was standing in it, just not for the same reasons. That is not the same. No, the cold air burned Sylvia's lungs. She wanted to forgive him because his pain was real. She wanted to stay angry because her pain was real too. Why keep hiding now? She asked. Rusk wants my land without knowing it's mine. He thinks the owner is an absent investor. If he finds out I'm Yardley, he'll move faster. I've been gathering proof he forged 2 lions and pressured families into selling. I meant to expose him before winter. You should have told someone. I have not been practiced at trusting. Neither have I. Her voice trembled, but she held it steady. Yet, you let me trust you in ignorance. Levi flinched. For a moment they stood with all the unsaid things between them. The shawl, the walks, the willow whistle, the way his hand had steadied her from the wagon, the way her voice had defended his worth. Then hoofbeats sounded down the street. Silas Rusk rode in with 3 men behind him and stopped before the bank. A crowd gathered as if pulled by a rope. Levi and Sylvia watched from the boarding house yard. Rusk nailed a paper to the post outside the bank. Caleb Barrow came running from the livery. You said 30 days. Rusk's voice carried. Default terms changed when feed accounts went unpaid. Auction in 1 week. North pasture, water rights, and south herd. That will ruin us, Caleb said. My wife just had baby. Then you should have bred caution before children, the crowd murmured. Levi started forward, but Sylvia caught his sleeve. Can you stop him? Not as a farmhand. The answer told her everything. He had power, real power. Enough to answer Rusk. Might be save Barrow, might be change the town. But using it meant becoming the thing he feared people would choose. Sylvia let go of his sleeve. Then perhaps it is time, she said, though the words hurt. Not for me. For them. Levi looked at her. And if I do, then people will know you have money, yes. And you will have to wonder why anyone comes near you afterward. A sad smile touched his mouth. I already wonder. Sylvia looked toward the bank, where Rusk stood satisfied while Caleb Barrow stared at ruin. I cannot tell you what to risk, she said. But I know what it is to have no one stand up when the whole town watches. If you can stand, Levi, then stand. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he walked toward the crowd. But before he reached the bank, Alistair Crane stepped from the doorway, saw Levi coming, and smiled like a man who had been waiting for the curtain to rise. Careful, Yardley, Alistair called. Or should I say, Mr. Yardley. The name struck the crowd like lightning. Conversations broke apart. Levi stopped in the middle of the street. Silas Rusk turned slowly. Alistair lifted a paper. It appears our humble farmhand is heir to one of the largest private fortunes west of the Mississippi. Faces swung toward Levi. The same faces that had mocked his patched shirt now stared with hungry astonishment. Sylvia stood by the woodpile, the blue shawl around her shoulders suddenly heavy as a vow. Levi did not look at the crowd. He looked back at her, and in his eyes she saw the old loneliness open like a wound. Mercy Crossing changed its opinion of Levi Yardley before sunset. By supper, men who had ignored him for years claimed they had always suspected quality beneath his quiet ways. Women who once smirked at his patched coat wondered aloud whether simplicity in a wealthy man showed Christian virtue. Mr. Mercer remembered, with great feeling, that Levi had always paid debts promptly. Deacon Halsey suggested that Providence sometimes concealed greatness in humble garments, though only days before he had preached against hidden pasts. Sylvia heard it all from the kitchen. Each word tightened something inside her, not because Levi had money. Money itself had no sin in it. It could buy medicine, settle debt, mend roofs, fill flour barrels before winter. What hurt was watching the town prove his fear true. They had not discovered new kindness in him. They had discovered profit. Levi did not come to the boarding house that night, nor the next morning. By afternoon, Rusk's men were riding hard between ranches. Alistair Crane spent an hour at the bank, with Lydia and Deacon Halsey. Caleb Barrow came to town looking pale and left looking desperate. Snow clouds gathered in the north, though it was too early for a deep storm. Sylvia worked until her hands ached. Work steadied her, but not enough. Near dusk, Annie burst into the kitchen. "Miss Sylvia, Mr. Levi's outside with Mr. Rusk, and they're shouting." Sylvia wiped her hands and went to the back porch. Across the yard, near the livery, Levi stood facing Silas Rusk. Rusk had 2 riders behind him. Levi stood alone. No hat shadow hid his face now. He looked stripped of disguise and tired down to the bone. "You think money makes you righteous," Rusk said loudly. "You hid like a coward while honest men built this town." Levi's voice was controlled. "You forged lien transfers from Amos Bell and threatened the Barrows with unlawful seizure. I have sworn statements." "From who?" "Frightened farmers hoping Yardley gold saves them." "From your own clerk." Rusk's face darkened. Alistair Crane emerged from the bank. "This dispute belongs in court, not at street theater." Levi turned. "You notarized 2 of those papers." Alistair stopped. The crowd, always hungry, gathered again. Sylvia moved closer but stayed near the boarding house steps. Rusk laughed harshly. "You have no proof that will stand. I have enough to delay every auction you planned." "Delay is not defeat." "No," Levi said, "but it gives men time to breathe." That sentence moved through Sylvia. Rusk leaned in. "You want war, Yardley? Fine. I'll start where you're soft." His gaze shifted and found Sylvia. Levi's body went still. Rusk smiled. "Rejected bride with a borrowed shawl. Tell me, Miss Turner, did he promise to buy you respect? Or did you choose him before you knew what he owned?" Heat rose in Sylvia's face as every eye turned toward her. There it was again, public shame. The town had not tired of it. It had only been waiting for a finer stage. Levi's voice cut sharp. "Leave her out. Why? She's the proof, ain't she? Either she is as humble as folks say, or she's the luckiest beggar in Kansas." Sylvia felt the old urge to lower her head. Then she remembered herself in the stage dust, holding a crumpled letter, while no one moved. She remembered Levi offering water. She remembered her own words. "He offered what he had before any of you offered what you could spare." She stepped off the porch. "Mr. Rusk," she said, "you keep speaking of me as though poverty made me deaf." A few people shifted. Rusk's smile cooled. "I speak plainly." "No, you speak from a high saddle and hope height sounds like truth." Someone coughed. Mrs. Bell stood in the doorway behind Sylvia, arms folded. Sylvia walked into the street until she stood not behind Levi, but beside him. "I did not choose Levi Yardley for money," she said. "I did not choose him at all in the way you mean, because no promise has been made between us." The admission hurt more than she expected, but she kept going. "I saw a farmhand offer water to a woman everyone else had shamed. I saw him mend gates he did not break, calm horses he did not own, bring food without asking praise, and hold his temper when small men begged him to spend it. If that man is poor, he is worthy. If that man is rich, he is still worthy. His money does not improve him. Your envy does not lessen him." The street fell silent. Levi did not move beside her. Rusk's jaw worked. "Pretty speech?" "No," Sylvia said. "Plain truth." Alistair's voice sliced in. "Miss Turner, you forget yourself. Your reputation is already fragile." Sylvia turned to him. "I did not forget myself. I found myself after you tried to leave me in the road." The words landed with a force that made Lydia Crane gasp. Alistair stepped forward, face flushed. "You ungrateful." Levi moved then, not violently, but with such speed that Alistair stopped. "Finish carefully," Levi said. The banker's son swallowed whatever word had been coming. Then the church bell rang once, not for service, but because young Tommy Mercer had been tugging the rope in nervous excitement. The single note rolled over the street and faded into the cold. Snow began to fall. At first only a few flakes, then more, slanting white through the dusk. Rusk looked up, then back at Levi. Storm's early. Roads will close by morning. You might have money, Yardley, but you can't file court papers through snow. He mounted. Auction stands unless a judge says otherwise. 1 week, he rode out. People began to scatter as the snow thickened. Levi turned to Sylvia. You should not have had to do that. I know. I'm sorry. I know that too. The distance between them remained, but it was no longer made only of hurt. It was made of everything unsaid and everything risked. Levi lowered his voice. I'm riding tonight to where? County seat. Judge Harwell can issue an injunction if I reach him with the papers. Roads might be gone by dawn. That is 30 miles, 32, in snow, ice. Sylvia stared at him. Go at first light. First light might be too late. Rusk knows it. That's why he smiled. Mrs. Bell came up behind them. No man rise that north road tonight, unless he wants Barry. Levi looked toward the prairie. Barrow's baby won't survive winter if Rusk takes their pasture. Amos Bell will lose his place. Others too. Then take someone with you, Sylvia said. No one who knows the crossings as I do. The wind rose, carrying snow under the awnings. Sylvia saw the decision in him. It frightened her because it was clean. Men who have already decided to sacrifice themselves are hard to call back. Levi, she said, do not risk your life because you think money is the only useful thing about you. His eyes met hers. The words had found him. She saw it. I'm not, he said. I'm risking what I have because for once it can do what it should. He stepped closer, not touching her. I did test the world by hiding, he said. I won't pretend nobility. I was bitter, tired, afraid. But I never meant to test you, Sylvia. By the time I knew your heart, I was ashamed of my silence. If I come back, I will answer any question you ask. If you want nothing more to do with me, I'll accept it. But I need you to know this before I ride. The snow caught in his dark hair and on his lashes. You were the first person in years who made me wish to be known. Sylvia's breath trembled. She wanted to reach for him. Pride held her back. Fear held her harder. Then, come back known, she whispered. He nodded, as if that were a vow. Within 20 minutes, Levi Yardley rode north into the storm, with a packet of sworn statements under his coat, and the whole town pretending not to watch from windows. The storm worsened after dark. Wind struck the boarding house walls hard enough to rattle plates. Snow blew under the back door. Mrs. Bell banked the stove and muttered prayers while pretending to count spoons. Sylvia could not sit. She mended one shirt badly, unpicked it, and mended it again. She warmed coffee no one drank. She went to the window until Mrs. Bell told her she would wear a hole in the floor. Near midnight, a pounding came at the door. Mrs. Bell opened it to Caleb Barrow, white with snow and fear. Rusk's men set fire to my Haisha. He gasped, trying to scare us off. Wind caught sparks. South roof burned. My wife and children got out. But the baby's coughing bad. Sylvia was moving before he finished. Mrs. Bell grabbed blankets. Bring them here. Caleb shook his head. Roads drifted. Wagon stuck half-mile out. Sylvia took Levi's blue shawl from its peg and wrapped it around herself. Mrs. Bell seized her arm. Where do you think you're going? To help bring the children. With that storm, my SS, Barrow just had a baby. And you ain't made of iron. No, Sylvia said. But I am able. She went with Caleb into the white dark. The cold hit like a hand over her mouth. Snow erased the road. Caleb carried a lantern, but the light showed only swirling flakes and the bent shapes of fences. Twice Sylvia fell to her knees. Once she lost a glove and had to shove her hand under the shawl until feeling returned in painful needles. They found the wagon tilted in a drift. Mrs. Barrow sat inside, wrapped around the baby, coughing. The older children huddled beneath a quilt. One horse had broken loose. The other trembled in harness. Sylvia climbed into the wagon. Give me the baby. Mrs. Barrow's eyes were wild. She can't breathe right. I have her. Sylvia tucked the infant beneath Levi's shawl, close to her own chest, and covered the tiny face from snow. The walk back became a blur of cold and prayer. Caleb carried the boy. The older girl held Sylvia's skirt with one hand and the wagon lantern with the other. Mrs. Barrow leaned on Mrs. Bell's hired man, who had come searching with a rope around his waist. By the time they reached the boarding house, Sylvia could no longer feel her feet, but the baby was warm. All night, Sylvia worked beside Mrs. Bell. They steamed cloths, warmed bricks, rubbed children's hands, fed broth to Mrs. Barrow, and kept the infant against steady heat until the coughing eased. Near dawn, Sylvia sat in a chair by the stove with the baby asleep in her arms. Mrs. Bell looked at her for a long time. "You could have died." Sylvia looked down at the child. "So could she. That all you got to say?" Sylvia smiled tiredly. "I suppose I'm not practiced at being sensible." Mrs. Bell snorted, but her eyes shone. "No. You're practiced at being good outside." The storm broke just as the sky paled. Levi had not returned. By noon, men formed a search party. Alistair declared it foolish. Rusk, who had come to town with false concern, said storms made accidents of even wealthy men. Sylvia stood on the boarding house porch, wrapped in the blue shawl, listening as they spoke of Levi, as though he were already a cautionary tale. Then a horse appeared on the north road. It came slowly through the drifts, head low, rein slack. Levi was slumped over the saddle. Sylvia ran before anyone else moved. Levi Yardley did not fall until Sylvia reached him. For one breath, he seemed to be holding himself upright by will alone. Then his body shifted, and he slid from the saddle into her arms with more weight than she could bear. They went down together in the snow. "Levi," she cried. His face was gray with cold. Blood darkened his sleeve, where a branch or bullet had torn through coat and skin. Ice clung to the edges of his hair, but his eyes opened when she touched his cheek. "Papers," he rasped. "Never mind the papers. Inside coat." Men came running. Caleb Barrow reached them first, then Mr. Mercer and 2 ranch hands. They lifted Levi and carried him into the boarding house while Sylvia held the packet he had nearly died to protect. Inside, Mrs. Bell took command with a voice that allowed no argument. "Table cleared. Stove hotter. You fetch Doc Emery. You hot water. Sylvia, don't stand there bleeding fear all over my floor. Help me cut this sleeve." Sylvia obeyed because obedience gave her hands purpose. Levi drifted in and out while they warmed him. Doc Emery arrived smelling of tobacco and wintergreen, probed the wound, and declared it ugly but not mortal if fever stayed away. "Bullet grazed him," the doctor said. Sylvia looked up sharply. "Bullet?" Levi opened his eyes. "Rusk's man, North Ridge." The room went still. Doc Emery bandaged his arm. "You can swear to that?" Levi's mouth curved without humor. "I can swear he missed what he aimed at." From his coat, Sylvia unfolded the judge's injunction, stamped and signed. Alongside it were sworn statements and a second paper authorizing federal inquiry into Silas Rusk's land dealings. He reached the judge, she whispered. Caleb Barrow covered his face with both hands. Mrs. Bell took the paper and marched to the front porch before anyone stopped her. "Mercy Crossing," she shouted into the street. "If you've come to gape, you might as well hear something worth a cold." People gathered fast. They always did. Only this time the story was not Sylvia's shame or Levi's disguise. It was a reckoning. Mrs. Bell read every word she could pronounce, and made Mr. Mercer read the rest. The auction was halted. The lions were under review. Rusk's clerk had testified that documents were altered after signing. Alistair Crane's notary seal appeared on 2 contested papers. By afternoon, Sheriff Tobin rode in from the county road with Judge Harwell's deputy beside him. Silas Rusk denied everything until his own rider, the one who had fired on Levi, was dragged in half-frozen from a lined shack and offered the truth in exchange for mercy. Alistair Crane tried to claim ignorance, then blamed clerical error, then blamed Rusk, None of it saved him from the deputy taking his keys to the bank office. The public conflict ended where Sylvia's humiliation had begun. In the main street before the bank, snow lay in heaps along the boardwalks. The sky had cleared to a hard, bright blue. Nearly everyone in Mercy Crossing stood watching while Silas Rusk, Alistair Crane, and 2 hired men were placed under guard to await formal charges. Rusk saw Sylvia near the boarding house steps, still wearing borrowed wool. He sneered, though his hands were bound. Sylvia touched the blue shawl. Levi stood beside her, pale and bandaged beneath his coat, against Doc Emery's orders. He started to speak, but Sylvia laid a hand lightly on his arm. "No," she said. "This one is mine." She stepped forward. "Yes," she told Rusk. "Borrowed wool. Given by a man who thought warmth mattered more than appearances. I will take that over stolen land, polished boots, or any fortune used to frighten hungry people." The deputy led Rusk away. No one laughed. That silence was different from the first one. The first had been cruel anticipation. This one was respect learning how to stand. Deacon Halsey approached, shame pulling at his face. "Miss Turner, I owe you an apology." Sylvia looked at him steadily. "Yes, you do," the deacon swallowed. "I am sorry." "Thank you." She did not comfort him for needing to apologize. That, too, was a kind of dignity. Lydia Crane left town within the week to stay with relatives. Alistair's bank dealings were taken over by the county until honest accounts could be made. Rusk's grip on the ranchers loosened as forged debts unraveled one by one. Caleb Barrow kept his pasture. Amos Bell kept his farm. The mill road opened again. Levi did not save Mercy Crossing by being rich. That was what Sylvia told Annie when the child asked if money fixed wickedness. "No," Sylvia said while brushing Annie's hair by the stove. "Money is only a tool. It depends whose hand holds it." "Mr. Levi's hand is good," Annie said. Sylvia looked across the room where Levi sat with his bandaged arm, helping Caleb's older girl carve a new whistle. "Yes," she said softly. "It is." Levi recovered slowly. Fever came one night and frightened Sylvia so badly. She sat beside him until dawn, changing cloths on his forehead and reading psalms from her mother's Bible when his sleep grew restless. In fever, he spoke names she did not know. His father, his mother, Clara. Once he whispered, "Don't choose the name," and Sylvia understood that old wounds do not vanish, simply because new love stands near. When his fever broke, he woke to find her in the chair beside him, still holding the Bible. "You stayed," he said. "Yes, because I'm pitiful." She gave him a tired look. "If you were pitiful, I would have slept more." He laughed once weakly, then winced. She poured water and helped him drink. After a while, he said, "I have decided what to do with the land. You should rest before deciding anything." I decided before the fever. Rest only made me too weak to argue with myself. She waited. "I'm forming a trust for the small ranchers tied to the Northwater. Fair leases. No man loses his home because a bad season makes him desperate. I'll keep enough land to work honestly. You do not need to prove you can work. No, I need to remember I'm alive." Sylvia understood that. "What of the fortune?" she asked. "Some will go to settle claims Rusk twisted, some to rebuild the barrow shed, some to Mrs. Bell. If she'll accept repairs to the boarding house roof without threatening me with a skillet, she will threaten you first, then accept." He smiled faintly. "And the rest?" Sylvia asked. His gaze found hers. "The rest will remain what it always should have been. Responsibility." The word settled between them. Days passed. Winter deepened. Mercy Crossing grew quieter under snow, but life continued. Bread rose. Cattle bawled at frozen troughs. Children tracked mud into clean kitchens. Men came to shake Levi's hand, and often found themselves turned towards someone else who needed apology more than congratulation. Levi never returned to being only a farmhand. But he did not become the grand man others expected. He bought no mansion. He wore the same repaired coat until Mrs. Bell declared it an offense against civilization, and Sylvia, quietly, replaced the lining. He worked beside men who now struggled to call him sir, and told them Levi was enough. With Sylvia, he was careful, too careful. He walked with her. He brought books for Annie. He asked about her wrist, though it had long healed. He thanked her for every bowl of soup, as if gratitude might build a bridge over what he had hidden. But he did not speak of love. He did not ask for promises. He did not touch her hand unless necessity allowed. At first, Sylvia respected the space. Then it began to ache. One late afternoon, she found him in the barrow pasture, mending a fence where snow had drifted against the rails. The sun was low, turning the whole world amber and blue. He worked one-handed, badly. "You are going to ruin that knot," she said. He looked up. "Likely. Move." She took the rope and tied it properly while he watched. "You've been avoiding something," she said. His breath fogged in the cold. "I've been trying not to press you. You have pressed me less than a feather. I hurt you. I hurt you. I lied by silence. You deserve a man who comes with no hidden rooms." Sylvia pulled the knot tight. "Every person has hidden rooms, Levi. The question is whether they lock the door when love knocks." He looked away, jaw working. She stepped closer. "I was angry, because you let me believe poverty made us the same. But I did not defend you, because you were poor. I defended you because you were kind. I did not keep the shawl, because it was all you had. I kept it because it was given with care." His eyes shone in the cold light. "I do not want your fortune," she said. "I know. No, you fear it. That is not the same as knowing." He looked at her then. Sylvia's voice trembled, but she did not stop. "I want the man who offered water when I had been made small. I want the man who rode through snow for families who could not pay him back. I want the man who calms frightened horses because he understands fear. If that man comes with land and money, then I will learn that burden with him. But I will not compete with ghosts who chose your name over your heart." Levi stood motionless. Then he removed his hat slowly. "Sylvia Turner," he said, voice rough, "I love you. I have loved you since before I had courage to speak it. Not because you defended me, not because you were grateful. Because when the world tried to bend you, you stood straighter. Because you see work no one praises. Because you have a heart that can be wounded without turning cruel." Tears filled her eyes and spilled before she could stop them. Levi took one step closer. "I have nothing to offer. That is clean of history. I have money I mistrusted, land I did not earn with my own hands, and a heart that learned suspicion too well. But every honest piece of me is yours if you'll have it." Sylvia looked at the fence between his hand and hers. Then she laid her fingers over his. "I came west to marry a man who wanted a servant," she said. "I found a man who wanted to be known. Yes, Levi, I will have that man." He closed his eyes as if the words hurt and heal in the same breath. When he kissed her, it was gentle, almost disbelieving. Snowlight lay around them. The repaired fence held firm against the wind. They married in the Mercy Crossing Church 3 weeks later. Sylvia wore a cream dress. Mrs. Bell altered from one, donated by Mrs. Barrow, though donated was too small a word for the way half the town stitched remorse and affection into the seams. Annie carried winter greenery tied with blue ribbon. Caleb Barrow stood with Levi. Mrs. Bell cried openly and threatened anyone who noticed. Deacon Halsey performed the ceremony with humility that sounded less practiced than before. When he asked who gave the bride, silence fell for one uneasy second. Sylvia lifted her chin. "I give myself," she said. Levi's eyes filled. No one objected. No one whispered. The woman once left in the dust now stood before them by her own will, choosing and chosen. At the small supper afterward, Mr. Mercer raised a cup of cider. "T.O. Mr. and Mrs. Yardley." Sylvia smiled but shook her head. "To Levi and Sylvia, Levi laughed softly. To Levi and Sylvia, in spring, they moved not into a mansion, but into a whitewashed ranch house on a rise east of town. It had a wide porch, a kitchen large enough for Mrs. Bell to approve, and a barn Levi insisted on repairing himself, despite Sylvia's warnings about his shoulder. They kept 2 rooms ready for travelers with nowhere safe to sleep. No woman arriving by stage with hope and fear in her hands would be left to stand alone if Sylvia could help it. The blue shawl hung by the door, not hidden in a trunk, not folded away as a relic. It was used, worn, mended again when the edge frayed. Sylvia wrapped it around sick children, chilled guests, and sometimes herself when evening came cool over the prairie. Years later, people in Mercy Crossing still told the story of the day Alistair Cray rejected Sylvia Turner and Levi Yardley stepped out of the crowd. Some told it wrong, making Levi grander than he had been, and Sylvia luckier than she was. But those who knew them best understood the truth. He had hidden his fortune as a farmhand because he feared no one could love the man beneath the name. She had been a humble bride with nothing in her valleys worth stealing, nothing polished enough to impress a town, and nothing left to lose but the dignity she refused to surrender. And when the whole world measured value by money, Sylvia Turner chose Levi Yardley in a dusty street before she knew he had any. On their porch at sunset, with cattle moving dark against the golden grass and lamplight warming the windows behind them, Levi would sometimes take her hand and look toward the road where the stage still came in. "You saw me when I was trying not to be seen," he would say. Sylvia would lean her head against his shoulder, the blue shawl wrapped around them both. "No," she would answer. "I saw you when everyone else stopped looking, and there, under the wide western sky, the farmhand with a hidden fortune and the bride once left in shame built a home where no heart had to prove its worth before being welcomed inside."